Give God 90 Radio on Demand. My name is Jerry Mitchell, your host for Give God 90. It is an honor to have you here. And today, in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to dig into something that I typically avoid, and that is eschatology, the study of the end times. But this time, I'm going to look at it from a little different angle, all right? So here's your warning. If you really, really are into studying the end times, stick with me. If you're not into studying the end times and think that, it's all about now, stick with me. If you really are, and I say this sarcastically, okay? If you're not sure what's going on, stick with me, because I'm going to show you how to find out, and you won't even have to open the New Testament to find out. How about that? There's the hook right there. You don't even need to look at the New Testament to find out about the study of the end times and what's going to happen. And I'm not going to say it can all be found in Genesis, but a lot of it can. Okay? That's just the way life is. First, let me remind you, if you've not done so, please download the Give God 90 app. It is absolutely free for your Apple or Android device. What that does on your mobile applications, you can go in, gives you a chance to search through the archives of this. If you're using a desktop or something like that, laptop, go ahead, go to Spreaker, just like you have been. We're also now available on many different podcast platforms. One of the things about Spreaker is they do distribute to places like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, and others, and we are available there as well. So don't forget all of that. Also, don't forget to go to GiveGod90.com. I get chastised quite a bit from my listeners saying, you've got to tell people about the website. It's great. And it's really not changed a lot since I first put it out. It really hasn't, because the format is still the same. The premise is still the same. If you want to improve your life, you can do it just by, following a few simple instructions given to us by the creator of the universe. It's that easy. He says, I made it. I designed it this way. I made you. I designed you to live in something I designed. And if you do it my way, things will go better for you. That's the way he designed it all. So today, as we look at the end of what he's designed, as things kind of draw that way, we're going to see some of the things he's done. And if you hear just a little bit of a touch of allergy in my voice, yes, it is there. And I apologize for that. But, people who deal with allergies or whatever this happens to be, and I hope that's what it is, sometimes we sound a little funny, but that's where we're at today. Eschatology. Are we expecting answers other than what we're getting from the people who look at, and for lack of better words, we're going to call it the end times. When things get ready to change, when things get ready to happen, even Isaiah looks at what's going to happen, how things are going to develop, what things are going to remain the same, what things are going to change. But before we even get to Isaiah, let's look at Genesis. Genesis has some really, really interesting things in it. Genesis chapter 3, of course, after the enemy comes in and he has his conversation with Eve, the Almighty comes down and he says, okay, what's going on? Now, these are my paraphrases, okay? God comes down, he says, what's going on? Adam, where you at? Well, I'm over here. Why are you over there? Well, I was naked. Who told you were naked? What's going on? Tell me. Cough it up. What's going on? Tell me what happened. Like God didn't know what happened, right? He knows everything. Of course he knows what happened. But the thing is, what's happening in that conversation is Adam has to realize what happened. The Creator already knew. He already understood. Now, Adam needs to understand. Sometimes we're the ones that need to understand this stuff. The instructions are there. If we follow the instructions, it's like, okay, this, slot A, is filled by tab B, and everything works. But sometimes, we have to put it together ourselves and we have to see it. That's what's happening in Genesis. Adam has to be the one to say this happened. Adam has to be the one that gets it right in his head and in his heart. So the punishments are laid out, and in Genesis chapter 3, the Almighty makes a very strange statement. And he says, your seed will crush his head, but he will bite your heel. Okay? Kind of an odd statement. What he's doing there, he's saying, look, this has happened. But when it's all said and done, a righteous person will set everything straight. A righteous person, being from the seed of Adam and Eve, right? A righteous person is going to make everything okay so that I can put everything back the way I intended to do it to start with. So now what we see, even from the onset of Genesis, while Adam and Eve are still in the garden, we look at Isaiah, and I believe it's in chapter 46, verse 10, where he says, I have told you the end from the beginning. What did he tell us? He said, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. If you can remember nothing else throughout this podcast, throughout what I have to say today, if you don't remember anything else, remember God wins. That is the biggest question eschatology can tell us, is God will win. Absolutely, without a doubt. It's how we get there. Okay? Everybody wants to know when. Everybody wants to know when. All throughout the Bible, we're never told. It's always in that day. In that fearful, terrible, however the description is, depending on what they're describing, depending on which translation you read, it's in that great and terrible day. The thing is, there's things that have to happen before we get there. We're not there yet. There's prophecy that needs to be completed that's not completed yet. We look, from Ezekiel, Daniel, wherever it happens to be that we draw a little bit of prophecy from, we can pick things out that have not occurred as of yet. Will they occur? Absolutely, they have to. The Almighty said it's going to happen that way. Some of the things that have to happen, Daniel said, I need to know this. I have to know. Gabriel goes to Daniel, right? You know the story, I hope. You've read Daniel. If you don't, go read Daniel and see what Gabriel has to say. Some of those things haven't happened yet. Also, we get to Isaiah. Damascus hasn't been ruined yet. So why do we get hung up on when? Well, let me come back to how we get hung up on when. Let's look at what is laid out. What do we have to see? And I'm not going to go through it all. I'm going to give you a very, very general concept, a very general idea of how these things, I should say, are laid out. And what we see is throughout Scripture, we get bits and pieces of pictures. If we even go to Exodus, and I know a lot of people get hung up on Exodus because, and I hate to use the word hung up, but we do. We get caught. We get trapped. We get snared. You pick your adjective. We get so engrossed in Exodus because, we look at this, and the people came out of Egypt, and look what happened. Oh, it was a wonderful thing. When Moses started writing Exodus, he was telling a tale of something that had happened. But what was more important to Moses than leaving Egypt, what was more important to Moses than the event itself was who showed up. It doesn't, if you read it in Hebrew, it doesn't, the title of the second book of Moses is not Exodus. It's not we left Egypt. The title of the second book is names. These are the people. This is who was present. Okay? Now we have this whole new thing about, the second Exodus. Well, folks, let me give you my take on this. Don't focus on where we've been. Okay? We can remember where we've been. All right? Focus on the journey. It's not even really the destination. Remember, the destination coming out of Egypt took 40 years to get there. It was a 10-day trip. Right? You could walk from where they were to where they were going in 10 days. 40 years later, they finally get there. It's not necessarily about the destination. It's about the journey. Let's look at Abraham's life. Abraham had an exodus, right? We get the word Hebrew today, which means to cross over, basically, right? From Abraham leaving his father's land. He left his father's land. He left his past life. The people that left Egypt left their past life. Did Abraham finally make it where he was going? Eventually. But he spent a lifetime getting there. It was about the journey. It's not about reaching a final destination. It's about what you do on your way. There's something so significant to this. Abraham's life, it's what you do on your way. Moses left Egypt. He went his way, and he went back to Egypt and said, look, folks, I can show you how to get somewhere even better. And they get into the wilderness, and we see things. We see bits and pieces and glimpses. Remember Korah, when he rebelled against Moses, what happened to him? He was devoured in fire, right? Do we see something later on in end times devoured by fire? Of course we do. We see, the final judgment, right? The sheep and the goats being devoured by fire. We see things from Ezekiel, Amos, Habakkuk, where the Messiah comes down, when he comes down to rule with a rod of iron and flames and fire shooting out of his hands. Absolutely, that is not necessarily just a metaphor there. He is really able, to when how do I want to say this? I don't want to make it sound like he is a fictitious character, okay? But it looks that way. And a lot of times the people who write fiction get their fiction from reality, and they're reading the Bible going, oh, wow, this guy's got flames shooting out of his hands. This is going to make a great story. Well, no, it's not such a great story. It's a great lesson. Because who is he punishing? Who is he destroying? He's destroying the followers of the people. He's destroying the followers of the people who followed false gods. Right? Here's the thing. If you believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you believe that there will be a Messiah that comes who reigns with a rod of iron, whether you think he's, been here yet or not, doesn't matter at this point. What matters is that you make sure you align yourself with that concept, that when he comes to rule, it's going to be for certain and for serious. Okay? It's that simple. If you happen to be one of my Jewish listeners who think that I am alluding to the return, Yeah, maybe kind of. But more importantly, what I'm saying is, when you get that ultimate Messiah figure who comes to lay down the Almighty's law, he's going to do it with every ounce of authority given to him, and he's going to do it with every ounce of power given to him, and he's going to do it in such a way that there will be no questions asked who he is, what he is, or how he's going to get where he's going. Okay? It's that simple. You will know. There will not be any question. For us here today, we look at these things and we say, oh, how's this going to occur? How's that going to occur? When is this going to occur? How is this going to happen? And we always come back to when, don't we? Always it comes back to when. Why are we so adamant about wanting to know the when? Here is the answer. Are you ready for this? Because if we know the when, we can do whatever we want to up to that point. The journey no longer matters until we reach that point in time. And guess what? That's when we all want to be right with the Almighty. We say we could do whatever we want to do up to that point. Ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't work that way. It truly doesn't work that way. Even if you're the last one to figure it out, okay? If you haven't heard, if you didn't know, that's one thing. But if you knew and you blatantly obsess over, well, you know what? And I'm going to pick a very obscure date, an impossible date here, okay? So there's no question I am giving you a fictitious date. And it's going to be the 31st of February, okay? Now, that's an impossible date. So let's use the 31st of February and say, okay, on the 31st, we have until the 31st of February on this certain unknown year yet. And guess what? We can do whatever we want to do up to that date. So now on the 30th of February, everybody goes, okay, I need to get right with God. And they will get right with God. And when nothing happens, they'll go right back to doing the things they were until the next 31st of February rolls around. Well, that's kind of stupid. Now, the Almighty has set this thing up where he says, you know what, I'm not going to tell you when this is going to happen. I'm going to give you things to look for, and I'm going to show you how to calculate what happens, but I'm never going to tell you when. But if you're smart and if you're wise, you'll be able to know by the things that have happened and the things that are close and the things that are getting ready to happen. You're going to know when you're getting closer, when you're getting closer, when you're getting closer. There's your answer to the when. If we knew when, we would go right up to the date, and then we would try to do everything we could. Until that time, we can do whatever we want. But the way the Almighty has designed, if we don't know the date, now we have to endure the journey. Now we have to, do what Abraham did. When he exodus, if that's a word, I don't think it is. It is now, though, because I just used it. But when he left his father's land, Abraham had to do something. He had to follow God's instructions. And when God said, Abraham, I need you to go here, I need you to go this direction, I need you to walk around this, I need you to be here, Abraham went. The people that came out of Egypt, God said, here's a list of instructions. I need you to follow these instructions. As long as they were following the instructions, they were doing pretty good, right? They got into the land where they were supposed to go. He says, now don't quit following the instructions. What did they do when they got into the land? They eventually quit following the instructions. One of the first things they did was say, we need a king. We want to be just like everybody else. We need a king. These judges ain't working for us anymore. We need a king. Samuel says, what am I supposed to do, God? And God says, give them a king. It's not your fault, Samuel. It's my fault. They don't hate you. They hate me. We do the same thing today. We do the same thing today. We look at God and we say, God, I know times are getting close, but, if you could just give me a time. Why do you need a time? Well, because if I had a time, then I'd know when I could get right. I should get right with you. God says you're supposed to be right with me all the time. You should be following my instructions all the time. If you follow my instructions, it will go well with you. Haven't you read? And we look at him and say, well, no, we haven't read. Or maybe we look at him and say, yeah, we read it, but. I read it, but. I want something better. One of the reasons I don't like dealing with eschatology is people get trapped in Revelation. You don't need revelation. Because everything in Revelation has already been laid out from Genesis through Malachi. Everything is laid out. All you have to do is put it together. There's a gentleman, his name is Miles Jones, and he is an absolute excellent teacher. He's not a great speaker, okay? But he's got a couple of really good books out. Get your hands on a couple of his books. And he does a very good job explaining eschatology from the Old Testament. He's very good at it. He can take you through many things. And he's great. He really is. I had a chance not too long ago to listen to one of his interviews, and really, the man's brilliant. He really is. We don't, and I hate to say it, we don't need revelation. Revelation makes it easy. The problem is with revelation that people don't know how to read it. And one of the things you have to be able to do when you're reading the Bible is understand if you're reading something that is chronological now, or if you're reading something that the chronology affects later. And they stick it in that way of writing. You know, like let's say somebody's going to take a trip, and by the way, when they get to their destination, they're going to have cake. So, you know, it says somebody's going to take a trip and have cake, and then they go on telling about the journey. Okay? That having the cake doesn't happen during the journey, it happens when they get where they're going. It's called a parenthetical statement. So there's a big word for you today. It's when you're reading something and it's in parentheses, that's a parenthetic statement. It's cause and effect. So if you're going out and you're going to make this journey, you're going to have cake when you get there, and then they talk about the rest of the journey, the cake's not already eaten. You get to eat the cake at the end when you get to where you're going. So you've got to look at the Bible that way too. Is it, did something already happen, or is it going to happen when we get where we're going? You know, you've got to be careful how you read Revelation, because Revelation is filled with those things. I mean, it is absolutely chock-packed full of those things. Once you figure that out, Revelation becomes quite easy, because you know what to look for. But before you get to Revelation, do yourself a favor. Look at everything from Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy. Look at Deuteronomy. Moses stands back and it's like he takes a breath, and everything that he wants to say comes out in one sentence. That's how to read Deuteronomy. Everything Moses wants to say, he's putting out there, and he's saying, oh, by the way, guess what? Eventually, things are going to happen this way. But intermixed with the eventually is what's going on right now. A friend of mine sent me some things the other night, and as I was looking over them, I'm like, yeah, that's good, that's right. Oh, he's got the fatal error there. Nope. And I wrote back and said, yeah, the basic premise is absolutely correct. There's some technical errors in there, but his basic premise is correct. And as we look at that, I realized at that moment, I will eventually have to have and put together and develop a teaching on eschatology in the end times. And as I work on that, whether it will be in this format or in a different format, I will absolutely give you access to it. And hopefully, the problem is, and I realized this very early on as I started thinking about this, is this isn't a 30-minute topic. This is more like a a weekend seminar type topic, okay? And it would take many, many, many hours of deep, intense teaching, going to pulling things from every part of Scripture so I can cross-reference where things happen, maybe in Exodus, to where things happen in Revelation. That's the type of teaching that would be involved in this. And I'm not sure that a podcast venue would suit that. So, if you're interested in something like that, private message me on Spreaker, it doesn't matter, and just say, we're interested in what you put together in this. I know I'm being led to work on that, but it might take some time, so bear with me there, if you will. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time. I'm not going to waste any more of it today. And I hope it hadn't been a waste. I hope this has been a blessing to you. But one of the reasons I do avoid eschatology is because, the answer when isn't there, and that's what everybody wants to know. That's what everybody wants to know. The answer that we should be looking for from eschatology is how. What's the best way to get there? What do we as believers in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob need to do right now to prepare us for what's coming? That is the answer we should be looking for from eschatology. What do we need to do? What do I need to do to prepare me for what's coming, for what's happening? And I could go into another whole teaching about what some people think about that too, but I won't. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an honor and a privilege to bring this to you. Thank you so much for putting up with my allergies today. I appreciate that as well. Don't forget to hit those like buttons, hit those share buttons. Keep this going. Please keep this going. There's too many people out in the world there that need to hear a message like this. Thank you once again, and have a blessed week.